In all the years I have been doing this work, there is one category of conversation that I find myself returning to more than almost any other. It is not the conversation about why avoidants withdraw, or what their silence means, or how to heal in the aftermath of their patterns. Those conversations matter, and I will continue having them. But the conversation that I find people most desperately, most privately hungry for, is this one. The one about whether the avoidant actually bonded. Whether what existed between you was real at the level of genuine attachment, or whether it was something more surface, more manageable, more easily walked away from than the depth of your own feeling made it seem. Because here is what I observe consistently in the people who come to me after a relationship with an avoidant. The thing that is eating them alive is not only the grief of the loss, it is the uncertainty about what was real. They felt something profound. They experienced moments of connection that seemed, in the living of them, to be among the most significant of their relational lives. And then the withdrawal happened, and the silence happened, and the narrative the avoidance behavior seemed to be writing was a narrative of shallow investment and easy departure. And the person left behind is standing at the intersection of two completely contradictory experiences, unable to trust either one, unable to resolve the dissonance between what they felt and what the avoidance behavior appeared to confirm. I want to resolve that dissonance today, not with reassurance. Reassurance without evidence is just comfort, and comfort without truth does not hold. I want to resolve it with the specific, observable, psychological evidence of genuine avoidant bonding. Because bonding in an avoidant looks and sounds almost nothing like bonding in a securely attached person. And if you are using the wrong map, you will walk past the evidence 100 times without recognizing it for what it is. Before I get into the specific things an avoidant says when they have already bonded, I need to establish something foundational about the nature of avoidant bonding itself. Because without understanding what bonding is for an avoidant, what it costs them, what it requires of their system, and why it is so rare, the specific verbal and behavioral signals I am going to describe will not carry their full weight. Bonding, for the avoidant, is not a gentle or a gradual process. It does not follow the arc that bonding follows for more securely attached people, the comfortable, incremental deepening of connection that feels, in the living of it, like something natural and welcome. For the avoidant, bonding is experienced as a kind of invasion, not because you did anything invasive, because their entire psychological system was constructed to prevent it. The walls were not built carelessly. They were built with intention, reinforced over years, and maintained with the vigilance of someone who believes, at a level beneath conscious awareness, that the alternative to the walls is the specific devastation that arrived the last time they were absent. When genuine bonding happens despite all of that, when someone reaches through the architecture, past the defenses, and lands somewhere in the avoidance interior that is genuinely, irreversibly theirs, it is one of the rarest and most significant psychological events in the avoidance life. It does not feel, to them, like falling in love in any romantic or welcome sense. It feels like a breach, like something they did not consent to and cannot fully reverse. Like waking up one day and discovering that a person has become load-bearing in your interior world without ever having been given explicit permission to be there. And here is what that bonding produces in their language and their behavior. Not the declarations and demonstrations that bonding produces in the securely attached. Something stranger, more indirect, more layered, and infinitely more revealing if you know what you are looking at. The first thing an avoidant says when they have already bonded to you is something that sounds, on the surface, like a complaint about themselves. It arrives in the form of a self-disclosure that seems almost incidental, offered sideways, embedded in a larger conversation, not flagged as significant because flagging it as significant would require them to acknowledge why they are saying it. It sounds like this: I am not good at this, or some version of it. I have always been better alone. I do not know how to do this properly. I am probably going to get this wrong. I described a version of this in a previous conversation, but I want to go deeper into it today because in the context of bonding specifically, it carries additional weight. When an avoidant offers you this kind of self-disclosure, this unprompted, vulnerable admission of their own relational limitation, what they are actually doing is something that requires genuine, deep trust to perform. They are letting you see the wound, not fully, not with the lights on and the door open, but partially, through the sideways angle of a self-deprecating admission that is simultaneously honest and deniable. They are telling you something true about themselves and leaving the door open to retreat if the truth is not received with the care they are wordlessly asking for. The key to recognizing this as a bonding signal rather than a deflection or a warning is what happens after they say it. If it is a genuine bonding signal, there will be a quality of waiting in the silence that follows, a barely perceptible pause in which the avoidance nervous system is monitoring your response with the careful, heightened attention of someone who has put something real on the table and is watching to see if it gets honored or dismissed. If you meet that moment with warmth and without pressure, if you receive the disclosure without converting it into an opportunity to fix them or push for more depth than they have just offered, the avoidance system registers something that it has almost no prior experience of. That vulnerability was survivable, that showing the wound did not result in either rejection or engulfment, that this particular person can hold the real part safely, and in that registration, the bonding deepens, whether or not either of you says a word about it. The second thing an avoidant says when they have already bonded to you is something I have come to think of as the precision memory. It arrives like this. You said something weeks or months ago in the context of a casual conversation that did not seem particularly significant at the time, and then one day, without preamble, the avoidant references it, specifically, accurately, with a detail that reveals they were not just present in that conversation, they were holding it, carrying it, returning to it in the private hours when what passes between the two of you lives in their interior and is turned over and examined with a care they would never volunteer having given it. This is one of the most intimate and most overlooked signals of genuine avoidant bonding, because the avoidant does not do this with everyone. The avoidant is, in most relational contexts, a skilled manager of their own engagement, present enough to function, absent enough to remain safe. They do not retain the details of conversations with people who have not reached a depth in them that makes the retention involuntary. The involuntary retention is the signal. When the avoidant remembers something you said with a precision that suggests they have been living with it, when they reference a detail that you had largely forgotten, but that they have been holding with the attentiveness of someone for whom your interior world has become genuinely interesting and genuinely important, what you are seeing is the evidence of a bond that operates in the avoidant's private hours, regardless of the degree of distance they are maintaining in the shared ones. They remembered because they could not stop thinking about you, and they cannot stop thinking about you because you have become, without their conscious permission, someone their interior world is organized around. The third thing an avoidant says when they have already bonded is one of the most complicated to decode, because it arrives disguised as its opposite. It is the future reference, and it appears so embedded in the ordinary texture of conversation that most people miss it entirely, or receive it without understanding its weight. A future reference is any moment in which the avoidant, unprompted, includes you in a vision of their future. Not necessarily romantically, not necessarily explicitly, but specifically. They mention something they want to show you someday. They describe a place they would like to take you. They reference an experience in their future with a you in it that they did not need to include but included anyway. For a securely attached person, this kind of casual future building is unremarkable. It is what people who like each other do. They imagine forward together. They project their connection into upcoming time. They include each other in the mental landscape of where they are going. For the avoidant, this is not casual. For the avoidant, including you in a mental image of their future represents a degree of psychological integration that their entire attachment system is designed to prevent. The avoidant who is not bonded does not project forward with you in the picture. They maintain a future that is definitionally their own, self-authored, self-sufficient, independent of any particular person's presence. The walls do not just keep people out of the present, they keep people out of the future. When the avoidant puts you in the future, they are telling you, in the only language that does not require them to stand fully in the terrifying vulnerability of a direct statement, that you have breached the wall, that you are already there, in the place they live, including the part of that place that extends forward in time, that the bond has happened whether or not either of you has named it. The fourth signal is perhaps the most revealing, and the least likely to be recognized as what it is. It is what I call the territorial disclosure. This is when the avoidant shares something with you that they have never shared with anyone else. Not necessarily something dramatic, not a confession or a revelation in the obvious sense. Sometimes it is something small, a fear they have never voiced, a childhood memory that has never had an audience, a part of their internal landscape, an opinion, a sensitivity, a private way they understand the world, that they have kept behind such a consistently high wall that sharing it feels, in the moment of sharing, like giving something away that they cannot take back. The avoidant who is bonded to you will, at some point, give you something that belongs exclusively to the interior, something they are not in the habit of giving, and they will do it in a way that is simultaneously intimate and deflecting, that shares the real thing while simultaneously minimizing the act of sharing, so that if the real thing is not received well, they can claim it was not the real thing at all. What you need to understand about this moment is what it costs them. The territorial disclosure is not the cost of a conversation or an evening, or even the particular vulnerability of a difficult topic. It is the cost of a wall coming down, a specific section of a specific wall around a specific part of their interior that was never meant to come down for anyone. And the fact that it came down for you, that your presence created the conditions, the trust, the specific felt safety that made the coming down survivable, is the most direct evidence of genuine, deep, irreversible bonding that the avoidance communication style is capable of producing. The fifth thing an avoidant says when they have bonded to you is the most counterintuitive of everything I want to describe today, and I want to be careful with it because I recognize that what I am about to say is going to collide with the hurt you have been carrying, and I want you to receive it with the nuance it requires, rather than the bluntness its surface seems to demand. The fifth signal is the push away that contains your name. What I mean by this is the specific quality of withdrawal that arrives when the bonding has become too significant for the avoidance system to sustain without activating the defense. The version of pulling back that is different from ordinary avoidant distance, not the managed, comfortable maintenance of space that the avoidant performs in relationships that have not reached genuine bonding depth, but the urgent, activated, full system retreat of someone whose attachment has crossed the threshold that their nervous system experiences as existential threat. The push away that contains your name looks like this. It is specific. It references you, your qualities, your particular way of being, in the explanation for why distance is being created. It says things like, "You make me feel too much," or "I cannot do this with you," or "Being with you is too intense." It uses your name, or uses the specific texture of who you are, as the reason for the withdrawal. This is completely different from the generic distancing of someone who is not bonded. The person who is not bonded does not need a reason that is specific to you. They simply create distance. The person who has bonded and is terrified of what that bonding means needs, on some level, to acknowledge the specific thing they are running from. And the specific thing they are running from is you, not the generic concept of intimacy, but the particular, irreplaceable reality of you, and what loving you requires their nervous system to sustain. The push away that contains your name is a declaration, not a welcome one, not a delivery mechanism for the feelings you deserve to receive, but a declaration nonetheless, of the magnitude of what exists, of the depth of the bond, of the specific, undeniable reality that you, not just the idea of closeness, but you specifically, have become something their interior world cannot contain, without the entire architecture of their self-sufficiency beginning to tremble. There is a sixth signal I want to describe that operates differently from the others. The others I have described are largely verbal, things the avoidant says. This one is more behavioral, but it is accompanied by a specific quality of language that makes it worth including here. It is the protection that arrives without being asked for. I touched on this in a previous conversation, but I want to go deeper today, because in the context of bonding specifically, it has a significance I did not fully explore. When an avoidant has genuinely bonded to you, something shifts in their behavior that is almost parental in its instinct and almost entirely unconscious in its motivation. They begin to do things that protect your well-being, small, practical, specific things that require the kind of attentive knowledge of your life that only genuine investment produces. And what accompanies these protections in the language of an avoidant who has bonded, is a specific kind of casualness, a deliberate, sometimes slightly overworked minimization of the significance of what they just did. They will do something that demonstrates extraordinary attentiveness to your particular needs, and then frame it in language that suggests it was nothing, that it required no effort, that it was simply the obvious thing and any reasonable person would have done it, and there is certainly nothing to make of it. The casualness is the tell. The avoidant who did not care does not need to minimize the significance of their actions. There is no significance to minimize. The avoidant who bonded and is frightened of what the bonding reveals needs to offer the protective behavior while simultaneously making it deniable. So they give you the gift, and then they wrap it in language that tells you not to look at the gift too closely. Look at the gift. It is the most honest thing they are capable of offering in that moment. The language is the defense. The action is the truth. Now I want to address something that I think is essential for this conversation to land in the way that actually serves you. Because I have described 6 specific signals of genuine avoidant bonding, and I am aware that receiving this information carries a risk that I want to name directly. The risk is this. You take everything I have shared, the precision memories, the future references, the territorial disclosures, the push-away that contains your name, and you use it not as information about what was real, but as evidence to sustain a hope that keeps you tethered to a connection that is not currently serving you. I understand why that risk exists. When you have been starved of certainty, when you have spent weeks or months or years trying to determine whether what you felt was real, whether the connection was genuine, whether the bond existed or whether you imagined it. Being offered evidence that the bond was real is like being offered water after a very long drought. It is almost impossible not to drink from it in a way that goes beyond quenching thirst. But I want to be clear about what the bonding evidence confirms and what it does not. It confirms that what you experienced was real, that the connection penetrated to a depth that the avoidance system rarely allows, that you were not imagining the significance of what existed between you, that the moments of genuine intimacy, the precision attentiveness, the territorial disclosures, the protection that arrived without being asked for, all of it was evidence of a real, deep, genuine bond that the avoidance behavior subsequently obscured but did not erase. What it does not confirm is that the bond was sufficient, on its own, to produce the relationship you deserved. Bonding and the capacity to sustain a relationship built on that bond are 2 different things. An avoidant can be genuinely, deeply bonded to you and simultaneously be operating from an unhealed nervous system that makes the sustained expression of that bond in the daily, unglamorous, consistently present way that a real relationship requires, something they are not yet equipped to provide. The bond was real, the love was real, and the gap between what was felt and what was delivered was also real. All 3 of those things can be true simultaneously, and holding all 3 is the most honest position available to you. I want to close with something that I think is the most important reframe I can offer after everything I have described today. Knowing that the avoidant bonded to you does not change what they owe you. It does not reduce what you deserve. It does not create an obligation to wait, to hold the space, to remain available at the depth you have always been available, while they remain at the depth their defenses permit. What it does change is the story you tell yourself about your own judgment, about whether you were naive, about whether the love you felt was responding to something real or constructing something out of hope and projection, about whether your capacity to sense depth in another person, to feel the bond that was forming before the other person was ready to acknowledge it, is a reliable faculty or a wishful one. Your judgment was not wrong. Your capacity to sense what was real in the connection was accurate. The bond you felt forming was forming. The depth you perceived was there. The moments that seemed most significant were most significant. You were not fooled by someone who felt nothing. You were bonded to someone who felt everything and had not yet developed the capacity to stay inside what they felt without running from it. That is a crucial distinction, and it is the distinction that frees you from the most damaging version of the story, the version where your depth of feeling was the problem, where your love was the mistake, where the next time you feel something this real, you should doubt it rather than trust it. Trust it. Your perception was working. Your capacity for genuine, deep, attentive bonding is not a liability. It is the most extraordinary thing about you. And the avoidant, whether they ever find the courage to face the bond they formed with you, or whether they carry it in the private hours of the defended life they return to, they knew it too. In every precision memory, in every territorial disclosure, in every push-away that contained your name, they knew exactly who they had bonded to, and so did you. You were right all along.